All right. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Restored Mind show where we're going to talk about harmful obsessions. And so, in this episode, what I want to do is I want to talk about, kind of a subcategory on our intrusive thoughts series where we're going to talk about harm obsessions or violent obsessions. And so, within again, the umbrella category of OCD, kind of the more intrusive thoughts and the pure OCD, there's kind of the three main categories, right? You have the religious or spiritual obsessions, which we covered in the last series, and then in this one we're going to talk about the harm, and then finally we have the sexual obsessions. And so in this series, in this part of the series, I want to talk about harm obsessions and violent obsessions. And so and there's kind of three. Well, let's first talk about what they are. So when we talk about harm obsessions, these are, thoughts and images that are going to pop up in people's mind that are going to be violent in nature, right? They could be images of, kind of images or thoughts of you striking someone, or, a lot of people have thoughts about, picking up knives and hurting someone. It could be like tools, a stapler at work, or, like a snowy village, like throwing it at someone, right? There's just so many variations of these thoughts that I don't want to get too caught up into specific thoughts people have, because that's what OCD wants, right? It wants you to get caught up in this idea that, oh, this specific thought that you're having is so unique, and it's so repulsive that and then it just really harps on that content, right? And again, when it comes to anxiety and OCD, we need to realize that the content of the thoughts is not the issue. Okay, so what I want to cover is kind of three main points here when it comes to dealing with and overcoming harmful obsessions, right? Harmful or violent obsessions. And so point number one is the idea of ego-dystonic versus ego-syntonic thoughts. And so ego-dystonic thoughts are thoughts that don't align with who you are, right? Ego-syntonic, on the other hand, are thoughts that do align with who you are, right? So first and foremost, one of the first things we look at, if someone's coming into my office and is like, oh, I'm having harmful obsessions, just by someone seeking help for these thoughts usually means that these thoughts are ego-dystonic, right? Because they realize that these thoughts are not things they want to experience. They don't reflect who they really are. So just the fact that one finds these thoughts disturbing in the first place usually is a good reflection that these thoughts are ego-dystonic, right? Secondly, when it comes to, looking at someone with ego, like these kind of thoughts, harmful obsessions, almost 100% of the time, I'll ask the person about like any past violent behavior, and they have zero past violent behavior, right? Like they're never violent people or have any history of violence. And again, one of the things that we look for too is like, hey, look, past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. So when it comes to harmful obsessions, usually people have no history of harm or hurting or violent or acting violently or impulsively. And of course, what happens when you ask these questions is, OCD wants you to go back and like look through every aspect. Oh, did I ever act violently? And so, so don't, if you get caught up in that, just don't do that, again, because this is just understanding that concept of ego-dystonic and ego-syntonic is so crucial, because you need to realize that these thoughts aren't a reflection of you. They're just thoughts that you're experiencing, right? And so that's point number one, is that idea of ego-dystonic thoughts, right? And realizing that that's what they are. Point number two is really, once we have that separated, we need to separate the idea of harm issues versus an OCD and anxiety issue, right? So impulsively violent people or people with OCD, right? And in the same light, when I talked about, scrupulosity or religious obsessions, I said, hey, look, we have to separate the idea of religious issues and OCD issues. And we really need to embrace and adopt the idea that, and the belief that this is an OCD problem, right? And if it's an OCD problem, which, OCD's, the characteristics of OCD are having these unwanted, intrusive thoughts that just kind of pop in your head against your will, right? Cause a lot of anxiety, uncertainty, and all these other uncomfortable feelings. And then you engage in compulsions to try to get rid of them, right? And that's really, which leads me to point number 3, where once we realize that this is an OCD issue, we need to realize that this is a compulsion problem, not a thought problem. It does not matter the content of the thought. Okay, it never matters. It doesn't matter what violent thought you had, the specifics of it, the intricacies of it. And people get so caught up in the specifics, right? Like, well, you don't understand. I had a thought about a knife, or I had a thought about scissors, or I had a thought about, throwing a child, like whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Because it's not a violent issue. It's not an impulsive issue. It's an anxiety and OCD issue. And so some of the compulsions that people will engage in when it comes to, and again, this goes back to the idea of the myth of pure OCD, which I know I've talked about in prior episodes, but there really is no such thing as pure O, meaning I only have obsessions, I don't do compulsions. Because in every single case that I've ever worked with that have these kind of obsessive thoughts, whether they're religious themes, harmful or sexual, there is always compulsions. And most of the compulsions are mental, or they're avoidant compulsions, reassurance, things like that. So identifying the compulsions is the critical part to, really taking your life back from these thoughts. Because what we need to understand is that every time you react to these thoughts in a compulsive way, whether that is praying silently, counting, suppressing thoughts, replacing thoughts, avoiding shows that trigger these thoughts, right? So a lot of people with harm thoughts will avoid violent shows or watching the news or, and these are all compulsions, right? Or they'll seek reassurance. And so they'll, ask their family member again and again, are you sure I'm a good person? Like, can you please cut this, cause I don't, and then so like, can you please cut the turkey or whatever, right? Cause they don't want to hold the knife around people, and then again, avoiding touching knives, hiding knives in cabinets. These are all examples of compulsions, right? And the more and more you engage in compulsions, what happens is it reinforces the thought, right? So when the thought happens and you get anxious and then you do a compulsion, you reinforce the idea in your brain that that thought was dangerous, right? So when you get that little bit of relief, what happens is your brain generates the thought again. And that loop just starts happening again and again and again and again. And that is the characteristics of OCD. That's why we have to understand that it is a compulsion issue, right? Not a harm thought issue. It doesn't matter the content, right? What matters is you find out and you really get clear on the compulsions you're doing. And then by eliminating the compulsions and sitting with the uncertainty, what happens is your brain experiences this phenomenon called habituation. And then as that happens, your brain learns that it doesn't need to produce these thoughts because they aren't actually dangerous. The more and more you react to them, the more and more your brain's going to produce them, right? And that's kind of the paradox, right? The harder you try to get rid of them, the more they're going to pop up. And because the content can be disturbing, it's very difficult for people, to really grasp this sometimes. So, that's why exposure and response prevention is the main treatment for this. And again, there's plenty of ways to do that. And, and I talk more about that in my program and whatnot. But anyways, so the 3 main points that I really want to summarize for harmful obsessions and violent obsessions are the idea that, hey, we need to separate the idea of ego-dystonic and ego-syntonic thoughts. And then we need to, once we've solidified that this is an OCD issue, not an impulsive like harm issue, we need to treat it as an OCD issue, and we need to look at identifying and removing compulsions, right? Compulsions are the issue. That's the thing that's keeping this cycle going. And those compulsions can come in any form, right? So it's really about identifying accurately and correctly all the different compulsions you're doing and systematically removing them. And so that kind of summarizes, when we talk about how to treat and how to overcome harmful obsessions, or that kind of that pure OCD with harm obsessions. And so hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully you found that helpful. Again, we have some additional resources to help you if this is something that you're struggling with. And so down in the notes below, we have some links to free resources on our site. We have assessments and all sorts of stuff to help you on your journey. So please be sure to click on that and, head over there and claim your resources. Because again, there's stuff to help you. And also we'd love to hear from you. So be sure to like and subscribe to our channels and comment, just so we know how we can help you by, letting us know episodes in the future of things you'd like us to talk about. And again, we just want to thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today. And we, hope you have a wonderful week. And I will see you on the next episode where we're going to continue on with these harmful obsessions and intrusive thoughts. So thank you so much. Take care and have a great day.